Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company on the 440 Sports Network, presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, here on the program on YouTube at Stillman & Co. Again, like and subscribe. Tell your friends. I have to tell you, last night, I was at the BMG Christmas party. Again, I'm now a +1 for all that kind of stuff. And I was at the BMG Christmas party, and I ran into somebody who was like, hey, man, I listen to the podcast every day. And I said to him, I said, you're the one. I say, you're the one. Thank you so much. But again, I keep up with all the numbers, and I see what people are watching and what people are listening to, and I see the podcast downloads and everything else. And again, for everybody that followed us from, the radio show over now, I greatly appreciate it. And again, tell your friends, like and subscribe. It is a Hot Take Friday here today on the program. Dan Graca is going to join us here. Yesterday, we talked a lot about Robert Saleh, because we're going to see Robert Saleh versus the Titans on Sunday. And if the San Francisco defense dominates, it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of you people out there say, Saleh, he's got to be the guy. He's got to be the choice. And so Dan Graca had the opportunity to catch up with him. He will join us here in a little bit on the Robert Saleh front. He covered the Jets, still does, covers the Jets. He hosts a show on ESPN New York. He and I used to work together at Mad Dog Radio. He hosts the night show at with the ESPN affiliate in New York. And he also does the pre- and post-game shows for the Jets. So we'll figure out how much of it's Jet stink, how much of it's Saleh stink, and so on and so forth. I want to start today's program on Cam Ward. And I want to start today's program when it comes to Cam Ward on the weird week it has been for Cam Ward. Because the Titans won on Sunday. But Cam was not happy about it after the game was over. We all know the story. Cam not very positive in the press conference. Arden Key, thanks to Will Boling, telling everybody what he shouldn't have told. Arden Key gets on Cam saying, hey, enjoy the win in the NFL. Cam on Wednesday at the podium says he's still not happy about it. And I heard Kaharski today on his show talking about Cam spent all year talking about how wins are all that matters, and then Cam wins and Cam's not happy, and And now Cam's going to get ready for a real test on the road against the 49ers. But I want to talk about Cam. And I want to talk about why Cam was upset this week about the way he played or the way the team played or whatever. I'm just going to call it like I see it. Again, I don't know Cam. And I'm not in his inner circle. I'm not in his psyche. But I do think I'm pretty good at pattern recognition. I think I'm pretty good at reading people. This is why Cam was upset. Yes, he won. And he said all year that winning is all that matters, because that's what everybody says. That's what every coach says. That's what every quarterback is supposed to say. That's what everyone says. Nobody wants to hear a guy go to the podium after the game and say, well, I know we lost, but I ran for 187 yards and 3 touchdowns. I'm the shit. Everybody says, well, the only thing that matters is winning. Again, Kyle Pitts, and we'll get to him in a little bit. Kyle Pitts absolutely dominated last night for the Falcons. If the Falcons had not had the drive at the end of the game leading to the field goal to win the game, if Kyle Pitts had 3 touchdowns and they didn't convert the 2-point conversion and they lost 28-26, you think Kyle Pitts would have gone in there yesterday and said, well, fuck, I had 3 touchdowns yesterday. I'm the man. No. So, of course, Cam every week is going to say winning is all that matters. But people want to know, if winning is all that matters, why is Cam Ward upset about the way he performed last week at Cleveland? And I am going to tell you why. Here's why. Because Cam Ward is pissed that Shedeur Sanders played better than he did. And unlike a lot of you out there who made all these excuses for Cam Ward, Cam knows it. And I actually think that's a good thing. Again, we had about 15 different excuses on Monday after Shedeur absolutely outplayed Cam by pretty much every metric that we had to keep hitting this button.
the Cam Ward excuse of the day.
But the one thing I'm going to give Cam Ward credit for is while we have been playing the Cam Ward excuse of the day extensively throughout this season, Cam Ward has not been the one who has been making the Cam Ward excuses of the day. It's everybody else. So by whatever metric you want to look at, QBR, Shedeur is better than Cam. Passer rating, Shedeur is better than Cam. PFF rating, Shedeur is better than Cam. Stats, Shedeur is better than Cam. By every metric, with the exception of winning and losing, Shedeur Sanders played a better game than Cam Ward. And I think Cam Ward hates that. I do believe that Cam Ward is super competitive. The way you hear about Tom Brady throwing a fit in the locker room over games of backgammon, I'm sure Cam is the same way. And so Cam played a whatever kind of game on Sunday, and Shedeur absolutely outplayed him. Whether or not that means Shedeur is a better player, that's how Cam interpreted it. So the Titans fans and Titans media were making excuses all week. Oh, it's not fair. That defense is number 2 in the NFL, and the Titans defense is 23rd. And so it's not fair that Shedeur Sanders threw for 364 yards. That doesn't mean anything and accounted for 4 touchdowns. And Cam doesn't give a shit about those excuses. He was pissed. He was pissed because he stepped onto the same field as Shedeur Sanders, who is a contemporary of his, and quite frankly, should be worse than him. He was picked 144 picks after Cam. And he outplayed Cam. And unlike a lot of you that don't want to admit it, Cam knows it. And again, I actually think this is a good thing. Because what it's telling me is that while everybody in Cam Ward's orbit has their heads up their ass, and we live in the everyone has their heads up their asses all the time society, Cam Ward's head isn't up his own ass. If Cam Ward is going to make it in the NFL as a franchise quarterback with this dysfunctional organization, with an incredibly reactive and volatile owner, Cam is going to have his head out of his ass, and he's going to have to live in reality when I doubt the people around him who are all jockeying for favor with that crazy owner are actually giving him the truth. Again, Mike McCoy gets up there at the podium and just talks about how Cam wants to be great every day. It's never, hey, we've told Cam, you have absolutely got to get better with your mechanics. Cam, you have absolutely got, it's always, when you see how hard Cam works, the kind of guy Cam is, when you do the Cam Ward thing, you don't understand. He wants to be great. He wants it. Okay. But that's all I ever hear about. How great Cam is. Mike Borgonzi, the general manager, he got up there at his one press conference and he made the excuse that Cam was a rookie quarterback on a bad team. Again, not saying Cam's got to get better. Those mechanics are not very good. Cam is not pushing the ball well down the field. He is not accurate enough. He is not. Borgonzi's up there making excuses. Again, on Monday, every boo-hoo Cam crew member, every one of the Cam boys had all of their excuses ready to go. But not Cam. Cam was pissed. He was pissed on Sunday, he was pissed on Wednesday, and he's still pissed now. Because Cam Ward knows Shedeur Sanders outplayed him. And Cam Ward has the pride that he doesn't want that narrative out there. There are 2 different types of people in this world. I am convinced of it. The therapist tells me that this is people who blame themselves versus those who blame others. I look at it like there are people who want the truth, which is information, versus people who want what they want to hear, which is affirmation. Let me ask you this. Do you watch cable news? Because if you watch cable news, you're looking for affirmation. Cam Ward seems to me like he can see the truth when everybody else just wants him to believe the sunshine. Oh, Cam, it's okay that you haven't thrown for 300 yards in a game. Oh, Cam, it's okay that you're dead last in the NFL in QBR. Oh, Cam, it's okay that your PFF grade is absolute dog shit. And I don't think Cam's hearing that. That's a good first step. Now, I sometimes wish Cam would heed a little bit of that lack of sunshine pumping when he's talking about other people, like saying things like, we can be a top 10 offense in the NFL when everybody with a brain knew they couldn't be, or saying things like Brian Callahan is the best coach in the NFL. But I think that's Cam at the beginning of his rookie year trying to figure out how to actually be a quarterback in the NFL and not the mentality with which Cam has. I don't think Cam thinks that Brian Callahan was some sort of incredible coach who, I don't understand it. I don't get it. How could they fire it? Nah, Cam's like, yeah, we suck. That's why we fired the coach. Even though a couple months ago I said he was the best coach ever. And here's what I think Cam is learning. And here's what I think is important. Again, if Cam is going to be successful, and because of the organizational dysfunction and Cam's shortcomings, his bad mechanics, his bad footwork, his short size, his unorthodox arm motion, and the fact that I don't think the Titans are going to build the roster the way you say that they need to do for us to fairly evaluate Cam. And I'm not convinced the Titans are going to get a great coach for Cam, which a lot of people think they need to do. I think he's going to fail. But if he doesn't fail, I think what Cam's going to have to lean into a little bit is something that a quarterback should never admit to. And Cam's got this. It's a selfish demeanor. Again, you can't be crazy selfish where everybody hates you. But you got to be a little selfish. And the reason Cam Ward was upset and still is upset with Sunday is because, yeah, we won, but Shedeur Sanders completely outplayed me, and I'm embarrassed by it. That's selfish. Again, that's good. Because in order to be good at sports, really, in order to be good at anything, when it's about you, you have to be a little selfish. A lot of people talk about confidence. I don't really believe in just saying things to make yourself confident. I believe that people become confident when they do things. I had the #1 radio show in town on a station that doesn't have a very good signal. And guess what? I'm confident I'm a pretty good host. But I wasn't confident that I was a pretty good host until those things happened. I thought I could do it. I was very excited for the opportunity. I was challenged, but did I have the confidence that I could take that weak-ass signal and go #1? No. And so I'm sure Cam is excited. I'm sure Cam has belief, but belief and confidence, they're not necessarily the same thing. But in order to be good at something when it's about you, you have to be a little selfish. Again, you can't be so selfish that everybody hates you for it and that that's all anybody talks about when it comes to you. And you have to do the things as a quarterback that you really probably don't want to do. You have to go to everybody on the team's wedding. If somebody invites you, you have to go. When Taylor Lewan got married, Will Compton went, Michael Campanaro went, and Marcus Mariota went. Because when you're the quarterback, that's what you have to do. You have to go to everybody's charity event. You have to welcome every draft pick next year on social media. You have to do all that extra bullshit that deep down inside you probably don't want to do because it doesn't necessarily help you get better at football or help you do what you want to do, but it's part of the political process of the position. But internally, you got to be a little selfish. You have to make it about you because the only thing that you can control, the only thing that you can work on is yourself. Cam has zero control over a punt being blocked like it was Sunday. Cam has zero control over Kevin Stefanski calling one of the stupidest two-point conversions I have ever seen. So why should he take solace out of the fact that, hey, we won because Dylan Sampson fumbled the ball, Shedeur threw a terrible interception, Kevin Stefanski's a moron, and they got a punt blocked? What did he do? Again, you can't outwardly say it. You can't say, yeah, I'm unhappy because even though the team won, I didn't play well. because that comes off as so selfish that you don't care about the team. But in order to be a really great player, you have to be a little selfish. Tom Brady had 3 straight years where his passer rating dropped. All of a sudden, the Patriots drafted Jimmy Garoppolo. It went back up, and they won the Super Bowl. Why? Because Tom Brady, a little bit selfish, doesn't want somebody taking his job. So with Cam, this weird week of, wait a minute, Cam Ward, all he ever does is say that wins are all that matters. And Cam Ward's unhappy after the game. And Arden Key's talking about it on the plane. And that whole week, Cam's still unhappy. Talking about standards and talking about trying to figure out the mixed messages. The truth is, Cam's pissed about how he played. And in a society where, again, most people in our day-to-day lives want to stick their heads up their asses and believe things that are not true but make them feel better, I am comforted by the fact that Cam Ward doesn't. So I actually think this week has been very telling as far as Cam's personality, and I actually am leaning in on that front. And I defend Cam for how he feels. Because, again, he can't come out and say, I'm happy we won, but I'm mad that I played poorly. But at least he's not listening to you people that are telling him that he farts perfume. Because if he does, he's got no shot to make it. So that's the first thing here on the program. And we will get to some of your reaction today on the program. First, though, I want to tell you about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical before we get to apparently this report. And I put report in quotations because I'm not totally sure that this is like a real report, but report about the Titans and their coaching search. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, the proud presenting sponsor of this program. They've been in business since 1990. They are family-owned and operated, 100% satisfaction. Happy you'll be, or the service is free. Again, I use Hiller at my home. They take absolutely great care of me. They can do the same for you. If a customer is not pleased with the work performed, Hiller will make it right. Learn more at happyhiller.com. Professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians that come into your home and leave it clean and better than they found it. Care is their core value, and they believe that when they care about others, everybody wins. They'll take care of every customer on every job, every time. That's Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporter of the Nashville Predators, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Tennessee Volunteers. And again, they take great care of my home. They can do the same for you. That's Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today. So there is a report that is out there. And again, it's kind of a report. So the report is that the Titans might be hiring Mike McCarthy to be the head coach. At least that's kind of the way that it's being positioned. Connor Orr of Sports Illustrated put in, I guess, a story. The line that he put in there is that Mike McCarthy is viewed by some as an early front runner for the Titans vacancy. Again, viewed by some as an early front runner. What does that mean? So I know a lot of people hear that and it's like, breaking news, because when it comes to the Titans coaching search, there really hasn't been a lot of information that's come out. And the Titans season has been absolutely pointless for the last 3 months. And we've got another month of wandering in the desert before they go out and hire a coach. And the reason I say this is because anytime somebody like a Connor Orr or an Albert Breer or a Jeremy Fowler, as he did earlier this week, connecting the Titans with Matt Nagy, Breer connected the Titans to Chris Shula and Jesse Minter. Anytime somebody like that puts out a story that has a name in it, it's like, did you see this nugget? And in the end, I'm not sure how much weight it really holds. I remember when the Titans fired Mike Mularkey and Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter were all over television talking about the fact that they're doing this to go get Josh McDaniels. And not one person mentioned Mike Vrabel. But when it comes to McCarthy, here's the one thing I do want to discuss. Is Mike McCarthy a bad coach? Like Brian Callahan, with all due respect, Brian Callahan was a bad coach. I mean, let's just call it how we see it. Brian Callahan was a bad coach, period. Hate to say it, but that's the truth. Mike McCarthy is 174, 112, and 2 as a head coach in the NFL. And that's with Green Bay and Dallas. And those are two very uniquely different situations. Dallas has one of the kookiest owners in the league with the biggest ego, and Green Bay doesn't have an owner. Those are very different situations. Well, he had Aaron Rodgers, and he didn't win. He won a Super Bowl. That's winning. Tony Dungy won 1 Super Bowl with Peyton Manning. Are you better than Tony Dungy? Sean Payton won 1 Super Bowl with Drew Brees. Are you better than Sean Payton? And again, I have my issue with McCarthy, and my issue with McCarthy is all about judging the book by the cover, and I will admit it. When I look at Mike McCarthy, and we talk about the new age of coach, the young guy, the tight pants, the latte, the big play sheet, the Shanahans, the McVays, the Zach Taylors, the Kevin O'Connells, Mike McCarthy looks like a big, dumb, fat oaf. That's it. That's the difference. If Mike McCarthy spent this year on Ozempic and lost 50 or 60 pounds, I bet a lot of people would feel differently about it. But the truth is, when you're the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, you're not in a position of power because Jerry Jones doesn't want the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys to have any power. Jerry Jones wants Jerry Jones to have all the power. That's why Wade Phillips and Jason Garrett get so much time to be the head coach, and he never entertains the idea of hiring a guy like Mike Vrabel. Bill Parcells could only be there for so long. It's just there's not enough room in town for 2 sheriffs, and Jerry wants to be the guy. And yet, Mike McCarthy won a shitload in Dallas. He's been a head coach for 18 years in the NFL. He's made the playoffs 12 times. That's pretty good, right? And I say this about McCarthy, and my impression that McCarthy's a big, dumb, fat oaf. And I say this without knowing Mike McCarthy from a jar of Vicks. The only guy in the coaching realm that I know anything about, that I actually know what kind of guy they are, and trust me, that's why I don't buy into he sucked with the Falcons, is Arthur Smith. I know Arthur's a good coach. I know Arthur's a good guy. So I have faith that if the Titans hired Arthur Smith, that Arthur Smith could do a solid job because I think Arthur Smith's a good coach. But I don't know Mike McCarthy, and I don't know Matt Nagy, and I don't know Chris Shula, and I don't know Robert Saleh, and I don't know these guys the way I know a Mike Vrabel. So again, I know we want to sit here and talk bad about McCarthy because on the sideline, he looks like a big, dumb, fat oaf. But the guy was a very successful NFL head coach. And not only is he a very successful NFL head coach, but he's an offensive coach who has made his quarterbacks better. Dak Prescott is a better player from when he got there to when he left. Dak Prescott throws for 400 yards every game. Aaron Rodgers was a better player with Mike McCarthy as his coach. So, again, I'm not running with this Connor Orr thing where, again, some view him as the early front runner for the job, which would make sense because of the connection to Brinker. Just like Matt Nagy makes sense because of the connection to Borgonzi. Just like Arthur Smith makes sense because of the connection to the organization. But I'm also not one to sit there and have a really strong opinion one way or another about Mike McCarthy because I don't know Mike McCarthy. My feelings are this guy's a big, dumb oaf, but he also won a shitload of football games, and that does matter. And he did it in places where not everybody wins a bunch of games. So I'll just say that when it comes to McCarthy. And we'll talk when Dan Graca comes on, because I think the Giants might be looking at McCarthy. We'll talk to him about that as well as we kind of dig into Saleh as the Titans get ready to play them. Okay, I do want to get to what I think is actually the biggest story in Titanland, and it's kind of embarrassing that it's the biggest story in Titanland. So we talked about this I believe, on Tuesday's show and yesterday's show, and it's not going away. So Will Boling, the team's road sideline reporter. Again, I would love to know how many NFL teams have a home sideline reporter and a road sideline reporter. But this is the Titans, where they had two general managers last year. President of football operations, who oversees the general manager, and the general manager who's technically in charge for whatever that. So again, the Titans think they're reinventing the wheel with everything. And so I guess they feel like they're probably doing the same when it comes to sideline reporting. But this Will Boling story has absolutely blown up. I'll reiterate what I said yesterday. Will Boling should have been kicked off the team plane. He's been kicked off the team bus. From my understanding, that had to happen. He got caught breaking a rule that everybody knows you can't break. And he has admitted on his radio show, I didn't hear it. I saw, it was written, but he said that he fucked up and he apologizes, which is the only thing he really can say. The fact that this has blown up as much as it has. The New York Post headline, Titans reporter Will Boling axed from charter after detailing Cam Ward's story. Pro Football Talk, Titans sideline reporter loses spot on charter for sharing story from team flight. Awful announcing, Titans sideline reporter removed from team charter after sharing Cam Ward's story from flight. The fact that this has blown up the way that it has is kind of embarrassing. But it's really about the state of where we are. I said yesterday, look, Kaharski tattled on Will Boling. And Kaharski can say whatever he wants to say, because somebody tweeted me today, because I guess Kaharski was like, oh, make it a big deal. He's the one that cheated on the ratio. And someone said the big difference between Jared Stillman and Paul Kaharski is Paul Kaharski loves drama and won't admit it. Jared Stillman loves drama and will admit it. And I laughed out loud. Now, I think there are a lot of other differences, but he is right. I will admit it. I love the gossip. I love the drama. I love the tea. I do. And I'm not backing down from that. But at the same time, I said, Will Boling doesn't need to lose his job over this. Like, next year, they don't need to move Lucas Panzica to the sideline because Will Boling told a very innocuous Cam Ward story. Granted, he broke a cardinal rule, but it's not as if he broke a cardinal rule to tell you that three guys were in the back shooting up heroin. So I hope he doesn't lose his job over it. But I actually want to talk about the nature with which this is blown up. The reason I'm talking about this is because I think this is, right now, the most interesting story to Titan fans. I see the digital numbers. I see the reaction. I see when people say, you're doing this for clicks. You're this. If I was doing this for clicks, I'd do the whole show on Will Boling. Because right now, that's what people want to talk about. People don't want to talk about Cam as much. The coaching search, yeah, there's a little juice there, but we're kind of a month out from it getting really hot and heavy. People want to talk about Will Boling. That's the society we live in today. I think it's so crazy. But broadcaster gossip and broadcaster slander is so incredibly popular in today's society. And I've thought about this a lot as a broadcaster. I went to college at Louisville in the sport administration program there, and I didn't know what I wanted to be. I didn't know if I wanted to work for a team and try to be a general manager. I didn't know if I wanted to be a coach. When you work as a manager, like I did for the women's basketball team at Louisville, a lot of times people get into coaching through that avenue. A guy who was a manager with me, Devrin Paul, he's a college head coach now. I just didn't really want to be on the phone with 17-year-old high school girls being like, hey, girl, how's school? Let's get you in on an official visit at 8:30 at night. Broadcasting has always kind of suited me a little bit, but I didn't know what I wanted to get into. At the time, and I know Syracuse is real big for this, but at the time, I didn't really even think like, oh, yeah, people go to school to be broadcasters. Now they have sports broadcasting schools. It's crazy. This is what happened. In the 70s, when TV really took over, the 60s is when TV started to get a little color, and then all of a sudden the 70s TV absolutely took over. When TV took over, people didn't just start idolizing broadcasters. Some idolized Howard Cosell, but they really didn't idolize broadcasters because there just weren't that many. They idolized the players. They idolized the games. They idolized the... With the proliferation of cable television comes studio programming, sports talk radio, and everything that we've had for the last 40 years. You build celebrities out of broadcasters. Stephen A. Smith is a celebrity. Colin Cowherd is a celebrity. I was, again, not involved in it, but I was on the periphery when somebody I consider to be a friend, Michelle Beadle, went after Stephen A. Smith when Michelle Beadle lost her show on Sirius XM because Stephen A. Smith was taking it over. And there was headline after headline about the gossip and the drama, and Stephen A.'s mad at Michelle and Michelle's mad at Stephen A. And again, I know both people and I like them both. Now, I completely stayed out of that one because when Michelle Beadle got fired, guess who picked up a bunch of those shifts? Me. And I was cool with it. But that's the world we live in now, where people love the drama and the gossip about the players and the teams. But because the players and the teams no longer are as honest as they used to be talking about who they liked or who they didn't like, it's now become more about the broadcasters. So this Will Boling story, it's really not that big of a deal. He broke a rule. The Titans had to react the way they react. Paul tattled so that everybody knew about it. And so the Titans had to do what they had to do, and it makes sense. And I'm sure Will Boling hates it, but I'm sure he gets it. But the reason this is such a big deal is because people love broadcaster drama. They love media fights. They love broadcaster fights. They love all of it. And I think it's crazy, just crazy how into some of this shit people are. I mean, look, I remember when I left the radio station and it was nuts. I'm sitting there in a meeting and they're like, we're going to announce this tomorrow. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'll, get with Sirius XM and I'll put out a statement and I'll, if you guys are done negotiating a contract and we're going to, fine, okay, whatever. And then I leave the room. And I'm getting phone calls from everywhere, and it's blowing up, and people are like, did you get fired? What happened? Did you this? Did you that? And I'm like, whoa now. Whoa now. I wasn't expecting. People care. Like, I don't get it, but people love that shit. And that's what the Will Boling thing is. The fact that the story has blown up to the level it has, the New York Post is not aggregating a story about Will Boling if they don't think people are going to click on it. But people are going to click on it because in today's world, people love broadcaster drama. And that's just the way it is. Okay, Dan Graca going to join us right now. Dan and I have worked together at Mad Dog Radio. He works for ESPN New York. And a lot of people have got this idea that Robert Saleh should be the next coach of the Titans. And I don't really know Robert Saleh, so I figured let's talk to somebody ahead of the Titans taking on Robert Saleh and the Niners this week. Let's get somebody on who does know Robert Saleh. There, and he also does the pre and post game shows for the New York Jets radio network. So Dan, when I heard all these Titan fans talking about Robert Saleh, and even like media members that cover the Titans saying, I think my top choice would be Robert Saleh, I thought to myself, I don't really know Robert Saleh. I know Arthur Smith. He was offensive coordinator here when Vrabel was the coach. I know, other coach, Mike McCarthy. Like, we all know what Mike McCarthy. So Robert Saleh struggled as the coach of the Jets, didn't work out with Zach Wilson. There were all these crazy stories going on. How much of that is Robert Saleh's fault that it didn't work out in New York, and how much of it is New York's fault that it didn't work out in New York?
Well, that's a lot there, Jared. And first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate you. I think there's a little bit of mixed bag with everything. I don't think that you point to one thing in particular as to why it didn't work out with Robert Saleh in New York. Now, he had 3.5 years to get this thing turned around, and he maxed out at 7 wins, right? And you could point to a variety of circumstances. First and foremost, you hit the Zach Wilson situation. Okay, the quarterback play is what ultimately sank him. Zach Wilson didn't work out. Then they went all in with Aaron Rodgers, and we know what happened 4 plays into that 2023 season on Monday Night Football. That year was basically a lost cause. And then last year, it remains to be seen whether or not the owner got a little too aggressive and pulled the plug on Robert Saleh maybe sooner than he did. I always say when you look back on 2024, they were 2-3 when he got fired. And you wonder if you could hit the pause button at that 2-3. Would they have eventually turned things around? Because Aaron Rodgers did play all 17 games. I don't know necessarily if it was a surefire playoff team, but I think that it might have been a little bit better than what they ended up. And for certain, I think I could probably wager a guess that the defense probably would not have gone south the way that it did the tail end of last season.
So when it comes to the Zach Wilson thing, again, the Titans have Cam Ward. I'm not a huge believer in Cam Ward, but the Titans believe in Cam Ward. So I'm guessing that whoever they hire is going to have to be able to support Cam Ward. When it comes to the Zach Wilson thing, did it not work out with Zach Wilson because Zach Wilson stinks, or did it not work out with Zach Wilson because they did not nurture Zach Wilson properly?
Well, if you want to point, the finger at the player himself first, let's take that angle, right? Zach Wilson's now been on 3 teams in 3 years, right? So he's moved around and rightfully so, right? And he hasn't even been a starting quarterback, 3 different places in 3 years for the most part. He's basically been, a backup or an emergency third string guy. So I think a little bit of that has to fall on Zach Wilson. I think that, when you trace Zach Wilson and what he was thrust into here, the organization still had Sam Darnold. They decided, I think economics played a role into it too, right? Because they would have had to extend Sam Darnold. They decided, let's reset the clock at the quarterback position. We got the number 2 pick. We'll draft this guy, Zach Wilson. He had a great pro day. We like the tape, blah, blah, blah. The thing about Zach Wilson, when he took over in 2021 as a rookie, remember, you had a rookie head coach, you had a rookie offensive coordinator, you had a rookie quarterback with a football team that was in essence rebuilding. It was not very talented whatsoever. And to make matters worse, from a tragic sense, that first year they hired Greg Knapp, the veteran offensive coach, to be the quarterback coach for Zach Wilson. And he was going to be the guy constantly barking in Zach Wilson's ear. And he was during the offseason program, mini camps and OTAs and stuff. And then tragically, Coach Knapp lost his life in that biking accident in July of that rookie season there for Zach Wilson. So he never really had that veteran tutor, if you will. But he also got thrust into the starting lineup right from the get-go. There's always this conversation, and this, even when you draft guys and bring rookies into the league now, it's, should you start them right away? Should you let them sit and watch for a couple of weeks? Like, there's no right or wrong answer. I think it depends on the player. But I think Zach playing right out of the gate here didn't help him because the football team around him wasn't very good. He and Mike LaFleur, for that system that they wanted to run, I don't think it was a perfect match. And it's funny because then when Zach Wilson got injured in those first couple of years, while Mike LaFleur was still running the offense, Jared, whether it was Mike White who came in, whether it was Josh Johnson, the veteran who came in, Joe Flacco even was here. All 3 of those other quarterbacks seemed to operate that offense more successfully than Zach Wilson did. So after a while, you kind of put 2 and 2 together and said, maybe it's not the system, maybe it's not the play caller, maybe it's just the quarterback himself. And then, after that 2022 season, Mike LaFleur was shown the door. And I think that there were other things behind the scenes that led to that. I think that somebody had to be the fall guy for, the lack of success that team had and the fact that, maybe the quarterback wasn't developing at the rate that they would have liked. So somebody had to pay the price. And I think it was Mike LaFleur. But even after Mike LaFleur came and went, there were players on that team that told me, offensive players that, boy, I still would like to see Zach in the Mike LaFleur system. Like, I think that, give him another whirl in year number 3 in that offense, and you might have had some different success there. So if you don't have a quarterback in this league, you don't have a chance. I think that. I think all of us that watch football do. And I think if you have to point to one thing, that's probably what betrayed Robert Saleh's time with the Jets more than anything else.
Okay, so with Cam Ward in the fold, Dan Graca, if Amy Adams Strunk were to call you and she were to say, I don't know Robert Saleh, you know Robert Saleh, do you think he would be a good head coach for me? What would you say?
I would say that you're going to give him the benefit of the doubt, or you're putting a lot of stock into the fact that it's his second time around. right? And any coach who gets a second opportunity, they're going to tell you they learned from the mistakes of their first shot, right? And there's things that he needs to learn from, and I'm sure that he has. And one of the things that I think is a knock against him from everything that you hear and what you observed is that, maybe he didn't hold guys as accountable as they should have been, in that locker room and with that football team. Because one of the things that, was spoken about this training camp and this offseason leading into this year from guys that were here and played for Robert Saleh, how guys are held a lot more accountable now than maybe they were. There's a fine line between being the head coach and still wanting to be buddy with the players and show that you're a player's coach and you have their back and so on and so forth. And I think that maybe Robert Saleh was a little bit guilty of that, because there are players on this team this year, Jared, that, volunteered that information. They weren't like poked or prodded and, tell me what was. They basically just came out and said, there's a little bit more of accountability now than there was in the past. So I think that that's number one. And number two, I think that, I think as the head coach of a football team, and we know that he has a defensive background, was he a little bit too maybe tied into the defensive side of things instead of being maybe the CEO, overseeing the entire operation, all three phases of that football team? And the other thing that was pretty obvious, it seemed like just from a body language standpoint, like kind of that fire and that passion and that enthusiasm that you see Robert Saleh now with the San Francisco 49ers that you saw with Robert Saleh his last go round with the Niners, the guy jumping up and down, excited on the sidelines. It seemed like that wore away a little bit, during his tenure here as the head football coach. So, you wonder what was behind that. I'm sure maybe not winning as many games as everybody would have liked. Maybe it was a contributing factor. But I think that if you're Amy Adams and you're trying to figure out, okay, is this the right guy for my football team? You're probably hoping that he is going to be in the long line of a lot of other football coaches who turn around the second chance they get and do it better.
I think there's a feeling around here that Mike Vrabel, for instance, was a defensive coach who was more of a leader type coach than he is a schemer or a strategist and I'll be blunt with you, Dan. I like Mike Vrabel. I don't think Mike Vrabel likes me very much, but I like Mike Vrabel. I did not think Vrabel would have the success he's had in New England. I think a big part of that is Robert Kraft putting Josh McDaniels in there and not letting Vrabel and his goons like Todd Downing run the offense the way that they ran the offense here. That being said, when you talk about a lack of accountability, or I read in The Athletic a story about how Robert Saleh was upset that he felt like the Jets got criticized more than the Giants. I don't necessarily see Mike Vrabel when it comes to the personality of Robert Saleh. When you see Robert Saleh, Robert Saleh, you've followed everything. Is his personality like a Mike Vrabel, Bill Parcells type of guy? Who's his personality like?
No, I think it's, and you brought up, the thing about being a little too sensitive to maybe the outside noise and the criticism and stuff like that. I think that that's something that he's going to have to do a little bit of a better job of, because I think it also, comes back to wanting to please people too much and wanting to come off as you're, this nice, likable guy. And whether that's, getting maybe a little too comfortable with, let's say, members of the media and things like that, which, he did. And, unfortunately, he never heard the end of that one in terms of, criticisms and things like that, which kind of backfired on him. But the thing with Robert Saleh is, and everybody that, told me, he's at his core, he's a nice man. You know what I'm saying? And I think that he tries to people please just because in his core, he's a good person. But to do this job, I mean, it's not like a regular job. You have to have that switch to where, you can't be Mr. Nice Guy, because you're taking cues from every guy in that locker room, and the guys are taking cues from you. You have to be a leader of a football team. You got to be a leader of an organization. And, I remember people telling me back in 2021, during that head coaching cycle, Robert Saleh was like the number one candidate out there. That was the guy, like the hot coaching candidate, right? And the Jets were over the moon when they got him to be their head coach. Because I remember when he showed up for his first interview in person there in 2021, immediately after the interview, he got on a plane and he was going down to Florida to interview with the Philadelphia Eagles. And there were people in that building, Jared, that thought that, oh, we lost him. He's not coming back. He's going to go down to Florida. He's going to talk to Jeffrey Lurie and he's going to coach the Philadelphia Eagles. And that was it. So, the fact that they came back to each other, they were elated because they thought they were getting that guy that helped build the Niners defense into one of the best and jumping up and down on the sidelines. But, things happen along the way, and obviously it didn't work out. And, whether it was bad luck, whether it was, guys at key positions not being able to stay healthy. Remember, he and along with Joe Douglas, the former general manager, despite all the resources that they invested into the offensive line, top draft choices and money spent in free agency, they just could never get the offensive line right. It was like a revolving door. I mean, we had a running joke, it seemed like, each week doing the pregame show, like, okay, well, it's, week 13, and today is the 11th different offensive line combination the Jets are going to start this year. Like, it's just, so if you don't have that foundation at the offensive line and the quarterback position, you're not getting returns there. I mean, arguably, those are the two biggest things you need to be successful offensively. And, those didn't do him any favors either.
Dan Graca with us. He does the night show, ESPN New York, and the pre- and post-game show on the Jets Radio Network. So I do wonder this. What type of offensive coordinators do we think Robert Saleh brings in? Because on one hand, he is part of that Shanahan West Coast offense, that crew. I call it the tight pants and latte crew, where they've got the latte in one hand and the huge laminated play sheet in the other hand. And he's part of that crew. At the same time, the name Todd Downing makes everybody's skin crawl here in Nashville. So when it comes to offensive coordinator, and the Nathaniel Hackett thing was weird, but that seemed more like a Rodgers thing than a Saleh thing. So when it comes to offensive coordinators for Cam Ward, if Robert Saleh were to be pitching himself to Amy Adams-Strunk, what could you expect out of him as far as offensive coaches and the coaching staff is concerned?
Well, and the other thing, let me throw in before I answer that question, going back to, in terms of, how much cachet does one have? Let's face it, the minute Aaron Rodgers came into the building, he ran the show, so think about it. So the last year plus of Robert Saleh being the head coach of the football team, it was essentially Aaron Rodgers' football team. I mean, nobody's going to come out and admit it, but, he was the guy that basically made the engine go. And even when he wasn't playing in 2023, remember when he was injured for the whole season, his presence was still felt, behind the scenes, and you had to answer constantly. Remember when he would, do those weekly interviews on Pat McAfee and talk about, my goal is to come back this season. And then he showed up on the practice field in December. And so like that became something that hovered over the entire football team. But, back to your question with the offense, the name that I go back to is the guy who was his original choice to be the offensive coordinator here. And that was Mike LaFleur. I don't think Mike LaFleur necessarily did a bad job. I just don't know if Mike LaFleur had the right pieces to work with. And I don't know if the organization, the people above Robert Saleh, were patient enough to see this thing through. So, I mean, Mike LaFleur right now is the offensive coordinator with the LA Rams, but and I know, and everybody that, watches football knows, Sean McVay runs that offense. He calls the plays. I mean, I'm sure it's not that Mike LaFleur is just sitting there with his feet up on the desk each week. He has a lot of work behind the scenes, but I guarantee you that if push came to shove and let's say Robert Saleh gets a head coaching job and he calls Mike LaFleur, hey, you want to come run the offense, like literally run the offense, you call the plays, it's your baby. I'm sure that Mike LaFleur would jump at the opportunity because, Robert Saleh and Matt LaFleur are best friends. They were like best men at each other's weddings. So, like they're almost like family. And I don't think I've heard anything to where that relationship was fractured anyway with Mike LaFleur. So I could see something like that. The Todd Downing thing, that was, Todd Downing, Keith Carter, another name, right, who was brought in there at the beginning of last year to be the Jets offensive line coach because the offensive line was so problematic. And
Keith Carter stinks too, by the way.
And that offensive line of Keith Carter did a great job. And, Keith Carter had to answer questions about, his bedside manner. He was accused of maybe, not necessarily being the best communicator, and that rubbed some of the players the wrong way. So I think from that side of things, that would be something that if I was in a position, either a general manager or an owner, to where I'm sitting down in an office with Robert Saleh and he's across the desk from me and I'm, going to grill him about, okay, this is, your second chance here to run a program. Let's talk about the offense. What type of coaching staff do you envision? You did this, and this back in New York. What did you learn from that? What kind of guys are you thinking about? I think that certainly that is something that needs proving, because the defensive part of it, you're good to go. That they had a top defense while he was here. So I don't think that that's going to be any sort of an issue.
Okay, so I'm going to use kind of the New York thing here for you, because if you had Cam Ward as your quarterback and your choice was between Brian Dable or Robert Saleh? Would that even be a tough decision for you one way or another? And I do wonder what you think of the coaching market as a whole, because last year there was a guy like Vrabel out there that everybody was interested in, and the Lions coordinators were the hot names. And this year the coaching cycle kind of seems like Matt Nagy, Mike McCarthy, Arthur Smith, Jeff Hafley. Like, what?
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
And there might be, who's the hot candidate in college that maybe some owner thinks that he can pry away, whether it's Marcus Freeman or, somebody like that. It's interesting, and look, I mean, pick your poison when you talk about the two football teams in this town in terms of trying to outdo one another. I mean, the situation with the Giants, with Dable was rough, and it seems like it just got worse and worse and worse. And the numbers would support that. And then you hear about all the stuff that was happening behind the scenes and this and that. I think even though Brian Dable had the initial success that first season and they somehow, some way made the playoffs, he got good football out of Daniel Jones. They won a playoff game. In a weird way, Jared, like if you're giving me a choice between Robert Saleh and Brian Dable to be my head coach, even though Dable maybe had more of the initial success, I think I would still probably roll the dice on somebody like Robert Saleh for a second go round that, maybe there's still a level more to go to with him in terms of, all right, I'm going to do things differently this time around and you're going to get a winning program.
Is there a coach that when it comes to the Giants that people think is like, oh my God, the Giants have to have this coach? Is there a guy out there? Because with the Titans, I don't think there's any, there's connections with Borgonzi from Kansas City to Matt Nagy. And then there's Chad Brinker, who's the president, and he was in Green Bay. And so there's Mike McCarthy. And then there's Arthur Smith, who was here. But there doesn't seem to be like, we got to go get this guy. Is there a guy as far as the Giants are concerned where they're looking at it like, oh, that's who they have to go get?
Well, I mean, it's the names. You've probably heard the names that are in the cycle, right? Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator from the Colts, because he's a Staten Island guy. He's a local guy. He had a cup of coffee as a Giant assistant once upon a time. Jeff Hafley's name is being thrown out there. He's a Jersey guy, so the local connection and all those things. But I think with the Giants, more than anything else, you got to ask yourself, do you really want to go the first time route again? Do you want to go rookie head coach again? Or do you want a proven winner? The thing, like, everybody seems to be so turned off, Jared, about Mike McCarthy. And I understand that Mike McCarthy has his faults. I get it. But if you allow yourself to step away from the negative, okay, like he went to the Dallas Cowboys. He worked for Jerry Jones for 5 years. He won 12 games in 3 straight seasons. The other 2 years that were sandwiched around those 12 wins, he lost Dak Prescott for periods of time during that season, and it wasn't as good. Like the way the Giants have been, the majority of the last 10, 12 years. I don't know how anybody affiliated with the New York Giants organization can look at a head coach who won 12 games on 3 straight years with the Dallas Cowboys. And, oh, by the way, had a pretty nice run with the Green Bay Packers, which included a Lombardi trophy and a lot of winning there. I don't know how anybody in that building can thumb their nose at somebody with a resume like that, if you get my point, right? So, like, maybe it is better to go with the quote-unquote retread, even though that's not a popular thing to do. But if a guy knows how to win, he knows how to win. Or would you want a guy who you're taking a flyer on as a first-timer? And the Giants have had a lot of swings and misses with first-time head coaches over the last 10, 15 years. I mean, it's pretty bad.
Yeah. So it just doesn't feel like there's a guy. And McCarthy, they treat him the same way here, which is like, hey, he's an offensive guy. He could be great for Cam. He's got great experience. He won. And then there's also, well, he's kind of – I truly think that the thing that hurts Mike McCarthy, I think it's that he comes off as kind of a fat bozo, like that people like with Vrabel, they see this masculine, just a Super Bowl champion player who, and I think with McCarthy, they kind of see this big oaf. And I think that hurts McCarthy.
Well, I mean, make no mistake about it. The Jets wanted Mike Vrabel. Dude, I was in the building. Mike Vrabel walked right past me on, I don't remember what exactly the date was, but it was the final weekend of the NFL season. So it was January of 2005. That Friday of the final weekend, I was in the building doing my stuff for the game that week. And Mike Vrabel was interviewing that day with the Jets. And he walked right past me down the stairs into the car, waiting to take him to the airport, to go back home or whatever. So if the New England thing didn't unfold the way it did, we might be talking about Mike Vrabel as the head coach of the Jets, because I know that they liked him a lot. And I believe it or not, I think the feeling was reciprocated. Vrabel really built some good relationships in the building, and I think that they still are in communication even to this day with some people. But neither here nor there. It's I mean, look, it's just the nature of the beast. It's the way that the game is reported. Like it's because like you're souring on a guy that's been an NFL head coach for the majority of 2 decades, and he only has 1 Super Bowl ring.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? He's like you said, you used the big oaf analogy. It's maybe he should have 1 more. He had Aaron Rodgers, a tremendous, top 10 of all time quarterback, and he only has 1 Super Bowl championship. We see the same thing happening right now in Pittsburgh and in Baltimore with those 2 coaches. I mean, think about the consistent winning that those 2 teams have done with Tomlin and Harbaugh, right? For now going on almost 20 years. But all of a sudden the fan base, some of them are stale, and they're tired of that because they should have 1 more. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they get to the playoffs almost every year, but they haven't won a playoff game in 6-7 years. And I turn it around with like the 2 football teams in this town, like they cut off their arm to go to the playoffs 6 straight years and not win a game, based upon, being eliminated by the 2nd week of November, and you're just kind of playing out the string. So it's all a matter of perspective. But like I keep coming back to, like, if you are chasing winning, as long as the Giants have, because we're talking about them, how could you say definitively no and Mike McCarthy is a turnoff for you with his resume as a potential head coach?
Yeah. Dan Graca, ESPN New York. Dan, thank you so much for your time. Always good to chat with you. And thank you for all the insight, bud.
Jared, appreciate it. Anytime, brother.
Okay. Thank you so much to Dan Graca for joining us on the program. And again, when it comes to Dan, I've known Dan for a couple years, working with him at Sirius, and now he's doing his thing at ESPN New York. And when I hear things like, one of the things people say about Robert Saleh is Robert Saleh wasn't really holding people accountable. I sat there and I think to myself, yeah, that Mike Vrabel fantasy that a lot of you people have. Yeah, I'm not sure that that's really what you're getting with Robert Saleh. That's what he said. Again, the way I look at it with Saleh is Saleh would absolutely have to just blow me away in an interview. And if he does, then I consider him to be the coach. Okay. By the way, I want to get to this. So I have not been following Kyle Pitts very much. What I've known about Kyle Pitts is that Kyle Pitts was taken 4th overall in 2021 ahead of Jamar Chase. That was a terrible decision, and Kyle Pitts has not separated himself as a high-end tight end in the NFL. And we know the Titans need a tight end, and we know that Kyle Pitts is a free agent at the end of the year. Kyle Pitts, since Drake London has gotten hurt with the Falcons, has been on fire. My buddy was a big fantasy player, and he was talking to me about whether or not he should play with Pitts. And I said, I don't know. And he said, Pitts has been lighting it up since London's been out. So he goes, I think I'm going to go with Pitts over Justin Jefferson in fantasy football. Again, I don't care what you do with your fantasy team, but now, because it's my buddy, I'm a little invested. I'm watching the game. 11 catches, 166, 3 touchdowns on 12 targets. Holy shit. I have to ask, has Kyle Pitts finally turned the corner? I mean, I knew when they drafted him, like I knew what Kyle Pitts was supposed to become, but he never became that when it was with the Falcons. His rookie year, he had 1,000 receiving yards. Since then, his highest is 667 until this year, where he's got 800 receiving yards. Is Kyle Pitts legit? It's worth keeping an eye on as he becomes a free agent. And again, the Titans need a tight end. Okay, let's get to our picks for the weekend. We did not fade ourselves this weekend the way we faded ourselves last weekend, and we were 2-4. So for the season, we're a terrible 38-51. Let's get to picking. I'm kind of surprised by the noon slate on CBS. Noon, CBS, Chargers at Kansas City. Kansas City is a 5.5-point favorite. The Chargers coming off a Monday Night Football victory against Philadelphia. Kansas City coming off another loss to the Texans. I am going to go this week with Kansas City. The one I felt really good about last week was picking the Texans because their defense was so good. Herbert's got the hand injury, short week. Kansas City, they're not just going to die that easily, even though I think they're done. I'll take Kansas City. I'll lay the 5.5, even though I probably shouldn't, because if they're going to win, it's going to be close because their team stinks. But I think this is a Kansas City show some life. I'll take the Chiefs minus 5.5. A big one at noon on CBS. This one, and again, the Titans play late, so this is going to be the one that I watch. Buffalo at New England. Buffalo is a 1.5-point favorite, noon CBS. New England beat Buffalo at Buffalo. New England's won 10 straight. They cannot be stopped. But they've only played one kind of good team other than Buffalo, and that's Tampa Bay. And I don't know if you guys watched, Tampa Bay's got their flaws. So here's what I think. I think this is the game that I am going to decide if I really trust the Patriots in the AFC playoffs or not. If they win this week, then I will say, I trust Vrabel, I trust the Patriots, I trust Drake May in the AFC playoffs. I don't, though. I'll go Buffalo minus 1.5. I'll lay it. I think Buffalo beats New England. Also, CBS, 325. Both networks have a game of the week. This is the CBS game of the week. And the CBS game of the week this week is Green Bay at Denver, 325. That's Tony Romo, Jim Nantz. Green Bay is a 2.5-point favorite. Give me Denver. I think Denver's a very tough place to play. I think Denver keeps all their games close. I think Denver wins. I'll go Denver over Green Bay. Give me Sean Payton over LaFleur. 325, CBS, Indianapolis. Phillip Rivers, maybe? At Seattle. The reason I put this game in here, Seattle is a 13.5-point favorite. Indy's not going to roll over and die. I'll take the Colts plus 13.5. But wow, 13, that's bigger than the Titans spread. Sunday Night Football. Minnesota, J.J. McCarthy, he sucks. At Dallas, 720 NBC. Dallas is a 5.5-point favorite. Here's the problem with Dallas. The second you start to trust Dallas to do anything, Dallas does the opposite. I'm going to take Dallas only because while I think Minnesota and Brian Flores have a great defense, I think J.J. McCarthy stinks. I think Dallas is going to win. I think George Pickens is going to go off. I'll take Dallas minus 5.5. But I certainly do not feel good about that. And finally, the Titans. On the road at San Francisco, 325. San Francisco is a 12.5-point favorite. If Mac Jones was quarterbacking, I think Mac Jones is better than Brock Purdy. If Mac Jones was quarterbacking, I would take San Francisco to cover. I'll take the Titans. The Titans have played better, closer games of late under Mike McCoy. I think this is going to be an uglier one. I think the Niners defense will be too much for Cam. I don't think the Titans will score a bunch of points. So I'll go San Francisco 17, Tennessee 10. They cover the 12.5, but it will be kind of ugly. That's it for us, everybody. Have a great weekend. Like and subscribe. Enjoy it if you're a Vanderbilt fan that Diego Pavia is in New York. He's not going to win, but enjoy the fact that he's there. That's it for us. Like and subscribe. Great weekend. See you Sunday for postgame.